So, Moonlight has finally arrived on UK shores. It is brilliant. It's got a lot of awards buzz behind it.
Yeah.
I saw it many months ago and I was like, it's great. I can't wait for it to come out.
Yeah,
It's
you've
come out.
been nattering about it non-stop. You came out of the LFF and you were raving.
I was
You
raving.
were stark raving naked about it.
Absolutely. So, it's a film best experienced with as little information as possible. So, we're going to talk as much as the trailer gives away. So, it's about this kid called Chiron living in Miami in the 80s. Must be, starts in the 80s.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's not entirely clear. And his mother is played by Naomi Harris, and it charts his life.
Growing up, you know,
growing
he's
up,
like, you know, from a boy through to adulthood.
a boy through adulthood, and Naomi Harris is addicted to crack. And it's about him sort of navigating his life with all these issues, these problems kind of facing him. It's sort of like, it's an odd one because it's on one hand very familiar but very different.
It's not very plot driven. I think that's what makes it hard to offer a, you know, pre-review summary.
But anyway, here is a clip of Chiron as a young boy talking to Juan, this father figure character played by Marshall Ali.
I was a wild little shorty, man. Just like you. Running around with no shoes on, the moon was out. This one time, I run by this old lady. I was running, hollering, cutting a fool, boy. This old lady, she stopped me. She said, running around, catching up all that light. In Moonlight, black boys look blue. You blue. That's why I gonna call you. Blue.
Say your name, Blue.
Nah. At some point, you gotta decide for yourself who you gonna be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
So part of what makes Moonlight so exciting is that it's got all the individual elements of it are very familiar, but it's all put together in a way that feels extremely new, and it kind of wins its way into your consciousness. It's a very unusual film structurally and tonally, and it's great to see that it's really capturing people. It's one of those films that is making no concessions to commercialism whatsoever, but is such an open-hearted and tender film that it's really exciting that it's found an audience. And I think it's like done pretty successfully in the US. I'm not sure how it's done over here, but it's one of those movies that it feels like a kind of art film, but it also doesn't feel like a film that the people who are depicted in the movie wouldn't want to watch, you know?
Yeah, there's nothing difficult about it.
There's nothing difficult about it, exactly. And the way that these people's lives are shown is rather than being harder to come at than a more traditionally structured film, feels like a fresh and true way of showing their lives that would connect, you know, that connects deeply with you. It's interesting because it's covering a lot of the subject matter, lends itself to issue-based movies.
Yeah.
This kid grows up in poverty, and the entire cast is black, obviously, and the film makes no bones about the racial discrimination that exists in the US. He deals with violence at school. His mother is addicted to drugs, and prison is another element of the story as well, which is obviously a huge structural problem for black Americans. But the film is not at all preachy. It's extremely... It doesn't feel like it's shying away from the issues, but more that its attitude is so gentle and optimistic, really, that it doesn't want to like punish you to make you realize how horrible things are. It's much more like inwardly focused than that.
Yeah, I think the difference is to similar stories that have the same subject matter is that the characters are often sort of pathologized.
Yeah.
In that it's kind of seen as part of a system. And I guess like before this movie, when I think of like black poverty youths, I'm thinking like The Wire or something, which perhaps isn't the best point of comparison because that's all about contextualizing everything. But this one's, the focus is purely on the characters and all the issues that face them are sort of around in the background, and it's not really about the issues, but it sort of is. It's just like it just trusts you in your characters, and you're with them, and it focuses on their humanity so much.
Yeah, I
that
think
all this
yeah.
stuff just is part of the course. It doesn't need to emphasize anything because the characters just lead you through it.
I think that the sort of operative word is humanity, and that in movies that focus on structural problems, they inevitably make ciphers of their characters in a way.
Yeah.
And doesn't make movies bad necessarily. I was thinking about this movie in a way in comparison to a film like I, Daniel Blake, which is a very political film, which has very directly political purpose and wants you to learn some very specific things about the British state as you're watching the movie. And that is fine. That's not a criticism of the film at all. But in Moonlight, the focus is on learning about like human nature in a way. And it's just it's like laser focused on the humanity of these people, and is full of subtlety and nuance. And the whole film feels like it's kind of an exploration of the guy who's discovering himself as he grows up, and it's like constantly learning new things about himself and reflecting on himself. And the film is kind of taking you on that same journey as an audience.
Yeah. And it's really cleverly structured and intricately structured in a way that constantly subverts your expectations, and where the stories break are quite, you don't really see them coming. And my experience of watching it was I sat down to watch it, and then it was like over, and like the time had just completely passed, and when it ended you're like, oh, is that it? But then you're like, of course that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's this like unconventional approach in the writing is reflected by Barry Jenkins' direction, and it's got this really impressionistic visual grammar to it. It's like an art house social realist movie.
Right. I mean, it's like it's a social realist subject matter, but it's in the same way that it is so like obsessively focused and interested in humanity. It like portrays all of that stuff as beautiful. It's like beautifully photographed and quite stylized as well. So it's like stunning to watch. It kind of reminded me a bit of Girlhood in the way that it's directed. That movie about young girls black girls growing up in the suburbs of Paris. And that's another film where they're poor and they're struggling day to day, but things that they do take on a kind of epic quality. They're very, very cinematic.
Well, it's just the idea, like, you don't have to make the movie ugly and show the day-to-day horror of, like, poverty to make that point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you don't, it's not necessary. It just infers that and then focuses on stuff that you haven't seen before, which kind of gives the movie such a refreshing take.
I think that the style of it is really interesting because it doesn't like, I mean, I agree with what you said, but I don't like I think that it's not that the film is like, oh, don't worry, looking at poverty doesn't have to be bad. Here's a beautiful image, but it's like all of those images serve a purpose in the story, like it's got this very interesting, the soundtrack is really interesting, it's this real mix of different musical styles. There's like hip hop tracks and like orchestral music, and it's all laid out with no sense of hierarchy between those different styles, or it's just that they're all like evocative in specific moments. I don't know. I find it a bit hard. It's one of those films that like I find it a bit difficult to talk about without like drifting into some kind of like new age reverie about how we're all connected or something.
Yeah. The film got a bit snubbed at the BAFTAs. No director nomination for Barry Jenkins is ridiculous.
Just crazy. Absolutely ridiculous.
But something which even the most racist of voters have failed to ignore is how good the acting is. And Mahershala Ali and Naomi Harris have got nominations, but universally everyone is brilliant in it.
Yeah.
And there's some very clever casting and like actors playing the same role who don't look very similar, but just somehow have imbued the spirit of the previous person's performance.
There's some kind of like notion in the film about the sort of flexibility of human identity in a way. And so having these different actors play the same characters who don't resemble each other particularly, just feels like it's all part of the spirit of the movie. It's one of those films that I hope launches several careers, I mean, even if this doesn't sweep the Oscars because La La Land is taking up too much room with its giant song and dance, it's a film where everyone in it you watch and you want to see what they do next. Mahershala Ali is someone whose career is kind of taking off anyway, but he's like absolutely mesmeric presence. He's a real movie star, and Barry Jenkins is super exciting director.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's
I've got to go
made
back and
with
watch his
such
previous movie.
supreme confidence. As
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the most confidently made films I've seen recently, and it's so. I think part of it is that like it's such a quiet, gentle film, but it feels like it's got such like craft that's gone into
Absolutely.
it. I think if you talk too much about it, you definitely turn into one like a talking head in a 100 Greatest Films documentary. You know,
It's just imbued with such passion and intimacy.
believe what we were seeing. It was so incredible.
Yeah, it blew people away in the screening I watched. I think, well, I was fortunate because like the hype hadn't built in. So like, you know, you read the blurb and you're like, it's probably going to be a very worthy drama, a very worthy drama. That's what I like to call.
Worthy drama.
It's a very worthy drama about issues and that. And then you watch it like, oh shit, that was incredible.
I think that the hype is something to bear in mind when you see the movie, because it isn't, or it certainly wasn't for me anyway. It's not like a loud film that really announces its own greatness. You know, you just have to like.
Yeah, it's not like Mad Max Fury Road.
I think you got to put your preconceptions aside when you enter the
Just let
cinema.
it.
Just let it wash over you. Adopt a calm and open frame of mind.
Absolutely.
What can you do to relax? Just put a warm, dry towel around your neck and
Look pretty weird in the cinema, but trust me.
isn't it nice when towels are warm? Yeah, I don't know.
And
Do some of that. I can't think of anything else.
so-
Put
yeah.
your feet in one of those baths where the fish nibble away the toxins.
So get yourself a warm towel and a little
Little
dish
foot
of
bath.
fish,
A little fish dish.
little fish dish, and then go watch Moonlight.
There you go, watch Moonlight. That's the film chat advice.
My favorite film stars Bridget Bardot. She's the queen, but she wants to be in radio. So she starts a podcast with her friends, and the terrorists try to stop her, but she beats them in the end.